Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we are going to be talking about environmental activism, especially about saving Laguna Canyon in Southern California and stopping California North Coast offshore oil drilling and other ecological actions from Hawaii and the rest of the world with my guest, Beth Leeds. She is a humanitarian and environmental activist. Her new book, which she has authored, is Inspired Action. She has also been named the World Peace Envoy to the United Nations. She is considered a protector of the iconic Laguna Beach Lifeguard Tower and was honored by the Laguna Marine Safety Association, as well as taking credit for many, many other actions. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us again.
Aloha, Nancy. It's fun to be here with you and your audience.
It's fun to have you back because it's literally been decades since you came to the radio station and we talked about some of your actions back in the 1980s, and you brought your beautiful airbrushed hat that you made especially for me with the name of my Eco News television program on it, and I still wear it. But we need to start with environmental activism because you are dedicated to saving the earth, getting people involved. You've organized over 10,000 marchers to save Laguna Canyon. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's begin where your book began. One of your very first chapters in the book, Inspired Action, talks about how you became an activist at 7 years old, where you got a stop sign put in because it was dangerous for cars to be speeding through an intersection. How did that come about?
Well, as a 7-year-old, I was going to the grocery store for my grandmother, and all of a sudden, as I was walking down the street, I heard this horrible screech, and I looked up, and a car had almost hit my grandmother's best friend. A bunch of people came out of their homes and all gathered around and said, "Oh, there should be a stop sign there." And I said, "Well, yeah, there should be," but nobody wanted to do anything about it. So I raised my hand. I said, "I'll go. I'll do something about it." So I went to City Hall, and clerk told me there was going to be a meeting that night. So I went to the meeting, and lo and behold, I went up to the podium and I said, "There needs to be a stop sign at Cliff Drive in Laguna Beach." They all said, "That's a good idea, but it'll take 3 months." And then they pushed me out to some other subject. Well, I interrupted them. I said, "No, there needs to be a stop sign there tomorrow. Someone could get hurt." So they said, "No, young lady, that's impossible." And they laughed at me, and I walked out. The next day, I took my chair and I sat right there so no one could get hurt. And I directed traffic. At 3:30 that day, the very next day, not 3 months later, a truck pulled up with a shovel, 4x4, and a red stop sign. They dug the hole, they stuck that pole in there, put the red stop sign on, drove away, and as they were driving away, they said, "You did it, young lady." And the stop sign is still there, and it was 75 years ago that I did that.
You did a lot of things in your years of activism, and you tell some beautiful, charming stories in your book because you basically, like that stop sign, didn't take no. You saw something needed to be done, and you were extremely effective in what we used to call the telephone chain, where you called somebody and they had a list of people to call to. All of a sudden, in a few hours, you got a few hundred people at a city council meeting or another kind of meeting by a commission that was going to be making a decision. Is that still the way to go with the internet?
Definitely. Phone calls work. The internet works too. And of course, you can put it on your Facebook, but you can say, "I made a phone call and I hope you can too. And here's the influential person's phone number. Could be a city council member, a congressman, or it could even be the president.
You have lived in many different places, Southern California, Northern California. You're in Hawaii, and all these locations have very beautiful ecosystems, natural areas that there's always somebody that wants to change that, whether or not it's an oil development, whether or not it's housing tracts, whether or not it's doing something polluting an important area like a surfing beach. What issues are you finding now that you are in Hawaii that need attention?
Wow, it's true. Right now, actually, I'm doing an action. And I met with an elementary school day before yesterday up in North Shore on Oahu, and the kids were very interested in creating truce flags, because I told them what a truce flag is, because they all knew about the monks and their walk for peace. And I go, but peace is a nice idea, but first you have to stop fighting. So you have to create some kind of a truce. And all the kids made truce flags. It's fabulous. I have them in my hands. We're going to send them to the White House.
You obviously want peace. You want people to get along. You want to see people in better conditions. How do you weigh the environmental causes with the societal humanitarian causes? Because they both need our attention.
Totally. You're 100% right. And that's the real issue, is people and the earth. So about 10 years ago, I spoke with our governor, who was then the lieutenant governor, and they were talking about building millions of dollars for housing for like 25 homeless people or 50 or whatever. And I said, well, another idea that would cost less and be more like what the people are doing right now would be to give them new tents, or actually sometimes even give them tents, because sometimes they just have a broom holding up a piece of cloth to sleep under. So he thought that was a good idea then, but now they're still working on, I think it's $1.8 million for 25 homeless people. I mean, please, no, we can take care of our own. They need to be doing what they're doing now, just better, and give them jobs. There's plenty of jobs. I think they could paint over all the graffiti with beautiful flowers, or actually, remember when they used to make leis and give them to people? There's free leis all over. They could just pick them, make leis. The governor could buy them for like $5 each, give them away, and everybody'd have a job.
Indeed, that money could certainly be used too to set aside new sanctuaries for the wildlife, to set aside parks and provide for people to maintain them, and to encourage people to go out into nature. But you mentioned making leis, but I was very much intrigued by how you described your certificates of appreciation when you went back to Washington and lobbied for stopping the oil drilling in Northern California. Everybody you met, including the secretaries and the receptionists, you asked their name, you had a beautiful certificate, you took your gold pin, you wrote their name, they remembered you. You even gave it to a taxi driver for helping you get to a place, and the next day you got the free ride.
That was fun. I love to appreciate people, and I like to show my appreciation. So I started making certificates of appreciation a long time ago. I think I've probably handed out maybe 10 or 15,000 of them. I don't know, maybe less, maybe more. But I like to have different sizes. Some of them are very small, maybe a card size or a quarter page, like the card size for people I just meet on the street, a quarter page for secretaries, or like you said, the cab drivers, and then half page or full page for the senators, congressmen, and I've even given them to 4 presidents. One thing they always say to me, I've never gotten a certificate of appreciation before.
People do appreciate being recognized for all that they do, even if it's just a little bit. But let's go more into the other interesting aspects of your lobbying activity when you tried to stop the oil development, that in the Mendocino coast, an oil spill really couldn't be cleaned up. There wasn't enough oil to make it worthwhile. It was going to be just a few years of supply, and it would destroy a beautiful marine habitat and the surrounding land. And you gathered a lot of people people. You worked with the county supervisors. You were sent to Washington, and yet you encountered some lobbyists who tried to take you off the official agenda. You eventually got back on. It's a long story, but very intriguing, because you were sitting in the cafeteria in the Capitol, and you were listening. You were just next door to some people who turned out to be lobbyists for the oil companies and for the major national environmental organizations, who basically said, forget the congressperson can't do anything. You will work with the staff. Tell us that story, because when you told the congressperson, he was outraged and he made sure you got back on the agenda.
Oh, that's so true, and that was so funny. I like to act alone with my friends, because then nobody tells me what to do. So basically, I have to support myself, which I did through airbrushing, so that I could lobby for free. I call myself a citizen in action. But when I went to Washington, I was invited by the Republican whip, actually, to testify before Congress, and the environmental groups, and actually two people in particular, went back to Washington. Of course, they were paid and everything, had their hotel rooms paid and everything, but they didn't want me to testify. They wanted to, but I was the one who was invited. So the congressman called me up, and he said, oops, Beth, can I send a limo over for you? I need to see you right away. And this was the day before I was to testify. And so I went to him, and he said, I have sad news for you. Two people told me that you were going to do some funny business when you were testifying, and I'm sorry, but I can't have you testify. And I said, well, were the two people, were they men? And he said, yes. And I said, well, I think I know who they were. I think one of them was the campaign manager for the Democratic woman that you ran against. He goes, you're in. See how politics works? He goes, sometimes people don't even want the good thing to happen unless it's them that are doing it.
That's also a story about how protecting the environment should not be a partisan issue. People in every political party and from every political viewpoint should be caring about protecting our environment.
Well, when I go to Washington, or when I'm at the city council or anywhere, I tell them, look, I'm issue-oriented, and I'm volunteering on my own time. I'm doing this because something needs to be done, and I'm here to help you figure out how you can help do it. And so I tell them, it isn't Republican or Democrat. It isn't male or female or good or bad or anything like that. It's an issue that needs to be solved.
And you did solve that particular issue. You stopped a lease to be approved for oil development in the coast of Mendocino County?
Yes. And then when I went down to Southern California, it was happening down there too. So I had to stop that one. And then I stopped two more because I was experienced and I knew everybody involved, and they knew me, and they knew it was the right thing to do, because I even convinced the bad guys. I go, are you a bad guy? And they go, no. And I go, oh, thank goodness. So like you were saying that one time when I was having some toast at the Senator's Lounge right before I met with the congressman, when the oil company guys sat next to me and were talking about it, saying, oh, we don't like that guy, and we have an appointment at 2:30, and I looked at my clock. My appointment was at 2. So I went and talked to him, and then as I walked out, I like to do this, I went, oh, one more thing, kind of Columbo style. And he goes, yes, what's that? And I said, do you have an appointment with two oil company guys at 2:30? And he goes, why, yes, I do. And I go, do you want to know what they said about you? And he said, yes, I do. And we sat down, and I told him. He called in the photographers. I had a picture in the Washington Post the next day. I got to testify, and I stopped offshore oil that time, because I think what happened with the Appropriations Committee, I think he said what the oil companies said about the bill and how they were going to crash it in and everything, and I think they voted my way. It stopped that offshore oil. So then, the last time I went to Washington, I wrote the National Ocean Protection Act, which they stopped also. And it's an act, 1999, and it saves the entire coast of the whole United States, including Hawaii, from any new offshore oil rigs, and it's still in effect.
In the many different places that you have lived, you seem to choose the coast. What is so attractive to you about the interface between the ocean and the land?
Hawaii is in the middle of the ocean. We're thousands and thousands of miles away from any other people or any other land. And I've learned that the Hawaiian Hawaiian people take care of the ocean. Malama, the Aina, take care of the ocean and the land. And even when the Howleys develop the land or want to put something in a place that's sacred, it seems like a lot of times it got saved even before I came. So now that I'm here, of course, I'm going to be instrumental in helping the Hawaiian people protect the ocean and protect the beach and protect the Aina and the mountains, because that's all we have. It's an island.
Wherever you are going to be protecting the natural area. You have done so much great action work as an environmentalist, and you've written about some of these stories in your new book, Inspired Action, which we are going to talk about when we return in a moment with my guest, Beth Leeds.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Beth Leeds, a humanitarian and environmental activist, author of Inspired Action. One of the actions that we were both very involved in trying to save a large piece of Orange County, California, in Laguna. And Laguna Canyon has some rare and endangered species, has beautiful natural areas. It didn't deserve to have housing tracks or a toll road. You organized over 10,000 people. I was there. I saw it. I know what you did to get people out to protest the inappropriate use of it. You eventually became coordinator chair of the Laguna Canyon Conservancy. Tell us this story about what was happening, what you did, what's there now, because you were truly instrumental in saving that wonderful area in southern Orange County.
Yes, I was. And I actually acted alone many times because a lot of the environmental groups actually wanted to take credit instead of me. So I really had to fight them as well. It was kind of strange. But nevertheless, Donald Bren, who was in charge and owned like almost all of Orange County and still does, wanted to develop and put in 3,500 housing units in Laguna Canyon, which was totally pristine. So I ended up actually working with him and his person that was his assistant, and she and I became friends because I kind of convinced them that they could do something else somewhere else and use this as a mitigation measure, or maybe they could name it for his father who had just died. So I actually worked directly with the frenemy, I call him, the enemy that I became friends with. And I did that in Germany as well when I was 11 years old. I go to Republicans and Democrats, and I find that actually the people who are doing the thing that I'm against, actually, in the end, I go, look, you have 500 rigs you're doing. Just don't do this one. Don't do it for me. And they go, well, okay.
What was so special about Laguna Canyon? Doesn't it have some endangered species? How many acres are now saved as a park for hiking? And what kind of flora and fauna is there?
First of all, in Laguna Canyon, which is like 4 or 5 miles or maybe 8 miles from Laguna Beach to all the way to the 405 freeway, it's been a road and a way for people to get into the coast for thousands of years. The important thing was the Laguna Dudleya, which is only found in Laguna Canyon. That's a very endangered plant. And then also, of course, the mountain lions. And of course, the reason I went all the way up to Alturas was because they were trying to take a little tiny gnatcatcher bird off the endangered species list so they could develop the canyon. And that's one of the ways that I was able to save the canyon, because of that little bird.
How many individuals are left of this endangered species?
Wow, probably pretty many, because the canyon has not been developed with the 3,500 houses. But, you know, it always needs protecting. There's the horny-toed lizard, there's the gnatcatcher, there's the Dudleya. Laguna Canyon is actually a very special place in the world. child. I was lucky that I'm third generation Laguna. So I got to be there when I was a child, going out to the middle of the canyon, and my parents collected sage. And then my daughter actually stopped the bulldozer from bulldozing some huge trees. And she actually stopped it right while the bulldozer was moving towards her. The bulldozer said he didn't see her, I'm sure.
That's a situation where somebody was willing to risk their life standing in front of the bulldozer.
My daughter.
Want to thank her very much for her actions. You certainly educated her about the need to be an activist. Laguna Beach, of course, has been well known when it was established as an art colony. People cared about their traditions there. You saved a lifeguard tower. Explain why you didn't want a nice, modern, new lifeguard tower.
I guess I again went to the city council, and I heard with 3 hours notice that the lifeguard tower was going to be torn down and a new big one was going to be built. Well, I used my telephone tree. I called 10 numbers and I asked them if they would each call 10 people. We had to be there in 2 hours at the city council meeting. The monstrosity of a new lifeguard tower had an elevator. I'm sure an elevator for the lifeguards? Oh, someone's drowning. Let's press the elevator button. No. And so it was easy for me to stop. And you know what? Now it's the icon of Laguna. Even the police uniforms, the city council uses it as their emblem. Everyone loves it. That, quote, old, dilapidated lifeguard tower. An icon for 75 years.
And it wasn't just the lifeguard tower. They were going to take an open space, one of the few areas along the miles and miles of Pacific Coast Highway where you could see the ocean, and they were going to put buildings, a parking lot, and now we've both been there recently, and it's still an open park. This is just one of the many different kinds of stories that you have told and can tell. The public action of many, many people showing up and caring about a place seems to be so important, even to this day, that we do have the constitutional right to assemble, to protest, to speak our minds. It is important that we do so, but in the efforts to save certain areas, there are so many complications. Sometimes you have the commissions or the agencies involved holding a public hearing hundreds of miles away. You were instrumental in getting the public hearing moved from Northern California to Southern California, where the people were, where the people cared. They couldn't all travel up there. Explain why so many times the hearings are held in the wrong place.
Of course, if they're held in the wrong place, fewer people come to the hearings, and so it's easier for them to say, well, not that many people showed up. So I actually did fly to Sacramento and then drive about a couple hundred miles up to Alturas, which is the very corner of California on the Oregon border, to appear, and I did. And you know what? It was so funny. I got there because it was only a couple of days that I knew, and I got there at midnight. The next morning I went to the coffee shop and told the people at the coffee shop what I was doing, and a man rushed in and said, a Lear jet just landed at our airport, and a bunch of men got out. Everybody said, it's because of you. And we all went to the Fish and Game hearing. Everyone. And actually people along the way joined us. I had a huge entourage, and we all walked into Fish and Game. I guess that stopped it. It was really an inspired action, and that's how I like to do things. And you were asking about the walk that you attended in 1989 to save the canyon, Laguna Canyon. And I thought of that because I thought something has to be done. And my mother was best friends with Jennifer Jones, who acted in the movie, I think it was called Bernadette or something. It was about the Lourdes miracle that happened in France, where the kids saw the Virgin Mary and the water came out of the cliff and people got healed. And I thought, wow, we should have a pilgrimage to Laguna Canyon. And I called it the walk. And that next week I wrote up a thing for the city council, and I said, we need to have a walk. And on November 11th, and this was in September, and they agreed. So I did it. I did it just by word of mouth and phone calls. And of course I called all the newspapers, and that's how everybody got inspired to come. Nancy, don't forget, but the way I really met you was because you were doing Earth Day, the first Earth Day up in Los Angeles, and I thought, oh, we can't go up there, everyone from Laguna. So I ended up having an Earth Day, the first Earth Day in Laguna Beach, because of you.
Thank you so much, and I think we have worked together and inspired inspired each other to continue our actions for many, many decades. You are an inspiration to many people, and I loved your book because you described the ins and outs of lobbying and campaigning and mobilizing people, and that's so important to know how to do it, know what the complications are, know what the ins and outs are.
Thank you, Nancy. And the subtitle for my book is How an Ordinary Woman Did Extraordinary Things, and You Can Too. And at the bottom of my book, I have a quote by Jack Canfield, the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul and the Success Principles.
I certainly wouldn't call you an ordinary woman because you've done an incredible amount of work to encourage people to get involved and have gotten people involved. You mentioned that you are a volunteer activist. You don't work for a nonprofit organization, and you had to support your 2 children, and you did it through airbrushing. When you did the airbrushing, at one time you actually airbrushed your daughter's horse.
I was airbrushing for 18 years for J.C. Penney's in my studio up in Mendocino and also in Laguna, and my daughter had a white horse, Cloud. Well, the white horse kept trying to get in my studio, and so I airbrushed at it, and I got paint on her mane. So I ended up airbrushing Cloud's mane and tail with rainbows in the 1970s, and she was in many parades, and actually, I think she ended up being the most famous horse in the world.
Beautiful work that you did with the airbrushing. I'm glad I still have the hat that you gave to me. I wish we had time to listen to all of your stories. You have many more in your book. You have many more when people talk to you. They can go out on an action with you and hear you tell the stories. But just briefly, tell us about the story where you met President Dwight Eisenhower, told him what needed to be done, and the next day the military did it.
Well, that's a true story. I was 11 years old in Germany, and we were the first dependents to go right after World War II. And most of the Americans, dependents and people, lived in what was called Little America. It was kind of like the Army's base. Most people that were over there, most Americans, didn't really hang out with any Germans. Actually, they were still afraid of Germans. But my mother said, no, we're going out and living in the country. So we were the only Americans in this little town, Oberursel, and I learned everything about the Germans, and I hung out with my German girlfriends and everything. So when Eisenhower came to Frankfurt to do a huge military thing with the military bands and cars and trucks and everything, he did a photo op, and they actually sat me in the front row with all the generals. When Eisenhower walked by, he said, is this a little girl that you told me about? And he grabbed me by the hand and took me over to a bench, and he said, how did you know all this about Germany and all this about the Germans? And I said, well, I live out in a little town, and I'm the only American in that town, so I had to make friends. He said, do you have any advice for me? And I said, yes, I do. All the servicemen have to wear their uniforms with their guns and everything when they go into restaurants or wherever they go, and it's kind of intimidating. I think they should be able to wear their civilian clothes when they're off duty. And he goes, oh, do you have any other advice for me? And I said, yes, there's rubble all over Germany still. And I went to Holland, and they actually cleaned it all up and planted tulips. I think that the military should clean up Germany with the Germans. 3 weeks later, the military got to wear civilian clothes, and they started cleaning up the rubble. And I feel like I helped with the deoccupation of Germany.
You certainly did, and that is just one of the many stories that you tell in your new book. Inspired Action shows how an ordinary woman can do extraordinary things, and you can too. I encourage everybody to read it. I have known you for a long, long time, and I still learned about some things that you did that I wasn't aware of, and I think it's great that you're sharing those stories. I want everybody to read it because it is indeed inspiring. Thank you so very much for sharing some of your actions with us. Thank you very much for being my guest. And as they say in Hawaii, aloha, which a lot of people think means hello and goodbye. They use it that way, but it really means love. And I've loved having you on the program. Aloha.
Aloha, Nancy, and all your listeners. Aloha to you guys.
I have been speaking with Beth Leeds, a humanitarian and environmental activist. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Perlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.